Yum. Blueberry. Hey everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I'm going to talk about how my skills have changed. Various people have asked this question in different ways. I went to look and I couldn't find the most recent one. But what I've been asked is, over time, how have your skills changed at what you do when you make games? And that's a long time. We're talking a long time period here to to go over. 45 years. So let's break it down into programming, design, and I put it as managing. It's really kind of project lead, game directory things, skills for that. So let's start with programming. When I started in BASIC in 1978. But professionally, by the time I was professionally making games in 1981, it was in C and assembly. Although my first tool was a tool in BASIC. When I first started making my game at that company, it was in C for Grand Slam Bridge. The assembly I knew was 6502 assembly on the Atari. But I quickly moved over and learned 8086 assembly for PCs, and I put that into a lot of my code. Fallout is mostly C with some assembly routines, either for speed or for access, things you couldn't get at in, say, DOS any other way than assembly. Since then, I shifted to C++, probably around the early 2000s. I've been C++ ever since, except for a brief stint in C#, which I learned to do some fun image processing stuff for my own home use. And then when I made a Unity game, which was Pillars of Eternity and Tyranny. C# is what you scripted in that game engine, so I knew C# already. Speaking of engines, I started making my own engines. Everything was from scratch. There were no engines. Everybody made their own engine. By the time we did Vampire Bloodlines, though, which we started in 2001, and it shipped in late 2004, that was in Valve's engine called Source. Went back to making my own engine at Carbine, but then when I went to Obsidian, they had their own in-house engine, and then we started making games in Unity, and then finally ended up making games in Unreal. With all of these, I would say that programming-wise, I think I'm a good programmer. I'm not a great programmer. And I say that because I've met a lot of great programmers. I've talked about seeing programming that I just gawked at. Like, this is beautiful code. I think personally my structure has improved over time. When I first started coding, it was basically just organizing functions in a file these are roughly similar, let's throw them all in this file, to methods grouped within an object, because C++ makes you think about structure like that. And I think I got better at structuring my code. For design, I got a lot to say on design, because design is the softer of those two sciences. Design was always present in the projects I did in terms of me doing design, but it started as a side job of doing my main programming job. So for Bard's Tale Construction Set and Rags to Riches, technically I was doing the programming, but I did a lot of design on the side. In fact, BTCS didn't really have a dedicated designer. It was Tom Decker and I were doing a lot of that stuff. Similar thing on Rags to Riches. On Fallout and Arcanum, I did a lot of programming, but I also did a good chunk of design. A lot of the design philosophy of Fallout came from me about how I wanted multiple paths through main story quests, the whole dumb dialogue stuff and luck. And then for Arcanum, big chunk of the system design was me. Jason Anderson did a lot of the tech side of, like, the tech side of the Arcanum tech schism, so tech skills and tech schematics. When I went to to Obsidian. At Carbine, I started as programming director and then became design director. So those were very separate. When I was programming director, I was programming. When I was design director, I was just doing design. When I went back to Obsidian, or went to Obsidian, South Park, I was mainly doing programming, but I got to do some design. On Pillars of Eternity, I got to do a lot more design, but I was mainly a programmer. By the time I got to The Outer Worlds, I was doing 100% design. Wasn't my first time though. Way back in 2001, when I did Temple of Elemental Evil, I was on that 100% as design. I was doing, I was writing dialogue, which I wasn't good at, and I was doing a lot of design work for the game, and promoted someone else to being lead programmer, and they handled all the programming stuff. Design-wise, I definitely have gotten more structured as time has gone by. When I first started, it was very seat-of-the-pants, design from the gut, I would say, kind of stuff, where I knew what I liked, and I just tried to write designs that reflected that. As time went on, I got better at coming up with design pillars, which were, here's just a few things that define all of the features that are going to go in this game, as well as design goals, which was for any feature that went in, here are the goals I'm trying to achieve and how they relate to the design pillars. The reason that got important to do is once our teams got bigger than about 10 people, you really, really needed structured design because you were going to have work done by people that you didn't necessarily oversee every single day. So your designs had to be extraordinarily clear. So I got really good at structuring my designs so that any questions someone may have while reading those, they could probably get answered inside the design. Over time, too, I've refined some of my abilities. I mentioned I wasn't very good at writing dialogue, which surprised me because I wrote the opening narration to Fallout, and I thought that was pretty good. What I learned over time, what refined for me, was I'm good at short-term or short-form writing, great at writing monologues, great at writing item and lore text that's embedded in the game as something you may find as a note or a log entry on a computer. I'm really bad at writing dialogue. Things that require the speakers to have character, I'm just not good at that. I assign that to people who are much better. In some cases, people who that's all they do. That's the sole skill they have, and they're really good at it. And there's some really good people at that. Interestingly, something I've mentioned on here a lot, which is I like to do my design documents in the order of make your setting first, then make your story within that setting, then make your mechanics to support that story and make sense inside that setting. That whole thing didn't even start until Arcanum, and I kind of tripped into it, and then I'm like, this is how I like things, and from then on I've always done things that way. Bear in mind, Fallout started with mechanics. Fallout started with, I had a bunch of different engines. I didn't know what to do. Didn't have any art style. Didn't have any idea of a setting or story. But I think we were going to do GURPS. So we had all these mechanics. No idea what to do with them. So it was interesting because I believe Fallout kind of went mechanics and then setting and then story, which is not how I would do it if I were going to do it today. Finally, let's talk about managing, which is kind of where I put project lead, being a lead programmer or lead designer, and of course, being a game director. This is stuff I fell into. I never thought I'd be doing that. I always thought I'm going to be a programmer. At best, maybe a lead programmer with some programmers under me. But with Fallout, I kind of was thrown into it. When my boss, my producer, couldn't have an extra project, Fallout became my project. No training. Over time, I think I got better at it. I think Troika was a really good out of the frying pan of Fallout and into the fire of Troika. I learned to get better at a lot of things. Project management, interacting with people as a manager, interacting with publishers as a client. Things got even better, I think, later. The thing I think I got best at is understanding other people's point of views. This does not mean I agree with them. This does not mean I'm even defending some, because I've met some people with some truly awful points of view. But usually understanding someone's POV doesn't mean they're wrong. and you're right, or vice versa. Understanding someone's POV gives you insight into how people are going to look at your game. It provides an insight, not a direction. It doesn't tell you what you should be doing. But when you understand how other people look at games, like I've met people who the first and foremost thing they look at the game is how pretty it is. That's what they care about. They care about the graphics. The very first thing. Other people are like, I want to know what the setting is, or I want to know what the labels are. What is it, an RPG, or is it an action RPG, or is it an adventure? This is important to me. I need to know that before I can even decide if I like this game. Understanding that there are people who approach games from different POVs help you make games, help you understand how people will interpret your own game. But there's a whole bunch of other things I had to learn being a manager. I had to learn when to step in and force decisions. There's a lot of times people will just spin, they'll just orbit, but they won't actually dive in and say, okay, we're committing to doing it this way. Sometimes you got to force them, sometimes by threatening to make the decision yourself. But I've also learned when to step aside and let better people handle something. I mean, with art, from the very beginning in my career, I'm like, I'm a colorblind person who's been trained at programming. I am not going to select art styles and dictate art. I need to find a good artist to work with, and they will do that. I've also stepped aside for other things, like if I work with a producer, most producers do better at scheduling, and especially external tasks. There's a lot of external tasks in today's games, localization, getting your product passed for all the different specifications there are for the different consoles and different PCs and video cards and all that. There's people who are just really good at doing that. I believe I have gotten better over time at project management, but I never really got great at it. And I've worked with some people who were great at it. So I've learned to step aside and let those people do what they do. So of all three of those, the programming and design and management, could I get better at those? Oh yeah, there's tons of room for improvement. And in game development, you never stop learning new things. But I believe I've kind of hit where I'm going to be. Like when I talk about writing, I could probably take writing classes and devote 100% of my attention and get a little better at writing, but I don't think I'm ever going to be a great writer. So I was like, a better use of my time would be spending it in system design and spending it in project direction. So that's what I did. But the whole point of this is you will always be getting better at all the things you do. You always can get better. Over time, you learn where to spend your energy to get better, where you need to get better and you can get better, and other places where either that's good enough for what I'm doing and this would take too much time for me to improve, time that would be better spent improving something else that would get a lot better. But I believe that's in a nutshell, those three areas, programming, design, and management. That's how my skills improved over time.